I'm very excited to be moderating this panel today. I took a look at all your profiles, very accomplished individuals, leaders in your own domains. Elizabeth E., Executive Vice President of the Rockefeller Foundation. Iqbal Dhaliwal, Executive Director at the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab. I will not pronounce this again, I will just say JPAL at MIT after this. Chen Lei Ming, who is also the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Ant Group. You also hold various roles within the Ant Group. And obviously, Selina Chow, who is co-founder of Horizons Ventures, as well as Director of the Li Ka-shing Foundation. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions, right? The QR code is on your tables, and I think the organizers would also flash this on screen. So you can direct questions, and if I find them interesting, I'll pose them to the panelists. You come from different geographies, Asia, your institutions come from different parts of the world, Middle East, as well as the US. And you also have very different backgrounds, investing, finance, research, academia, as well as in business, technology arenas. And collectively, you marshal significant resources. People want to work with you. They look to what you are doing because they learn from what you're doing. So you have also significant influence. But we are also at a very critical time in history with the climate emergency. Time is running out. We are at the tipping point of what scientists have coined the planetary boundaries, whether this is in terms of carbon emissions, nature loss, fresh water, and we are already experiencing many of these extreme weather events with increased intensity and frequency. So actually on your shoulders, other than the fact that you're commanding significant resources and you have extensive networks, it's also the fact that you shoulder a lot of responsibility because you have the power to drive change and to lead all of us on this journey. And what we want to talk about today is around speed and scale. We want to talk about how we can address the three tragedies. The tragedy of the global commons, which is manifested in the form of climate emergency. We are talking about the tragedy of time, of horizons. How do we bring the future forward to expedite action today? Right, so there's no more postponing, let's wait till tomorrow, let's wait till 2030 before we start thinking about how do we cut emissions and reverse nature loss. We're also dealing with the tragedy of system latency, which is that human beings by nature just don't like change. We've heard the lady from Welcome Leap talk about the need for breakthroughs, but it's very difficult because there is latency in the systems. So what we are thinking about is really, can frontier solutions, whether it's in the form of technology, it's in the form of philanthropy, whether it's in the form of behavioral science, actually create that acupuncture points to drive systems change today that can help deal with the global commons problem or challenge, as we coin it. So that's my challenge to you for the next 30 minutes. I've done my job, I've framed the issues, and we'll love to hear your insights, starting with Elizabeth. You are from the Rockefeller Foundation, 111 years of legacy. You've done many programs, projects. You've also set very ambitious targets to mobilize billions in terms of climate financing to address the challenge. Can you tell us what are some of the insights that you're applying in your ambition? And more importantly, what are the things that has not worked? And you'll tell us, please don't go there, you know. So tell us what has worked, what you're thinking of, but also where are the areas where you have learned from your history, you've learned from others, and say, let's also learn from those mistakes, so to speak, or failures, so that we can get smarter in navigating the pathway forward.
Thank you, Kim Wei, and thank you for including me. on this panel. It's nice to be here with you today. You're right, the foundation was created 111 years ago by John D. Rockefeller, who, as many of you know, was the founder of Standard Oil. And so as a foundation, we feel a very deep responsibility as we look forward to the future and even looking at the present now to acknowledge that so many people are challenged by climate change. Many who are right now, many who will be in the future. And so last year, as a foundation, the first time in 111 years, we released an entire Olive Foundation climate strategy. Because as a foundation that was created by John D. Rockefeller on the principle of science-based philanthropy and advancing the well-being of humanity, we felt that there was no more important challenge right now than addressing the climate crisis and that which is happening to vulnerable communities around the world. And so we did that both through our programs, which I oversee, as well as making a commitment through our endowment and our operations to net zero. And we're working so we ensure that we're walking the talk as we do it. And I mentioned that, Gim Hui, because I think one of the insights that was important to us is that, sure, we can tip our programmatic areas. We can make sure that we are delivering solutions for people around good food, good health, climate and health, around improving finance systems and ensuring that communities around the world have access to clean energy that don't. However, if we don't actually understand what it means to change the way that we work and the way that we invest in the world, we won't really drive the outcomes that we want. So I think that's one of the key learnings for us and an insight for us as we do it. And it's been amazing to be along that journey because we're now in the process of working with communities around the world to understand those challenges, as well as engaging with the private sector, with investors to understand what those opportunities are. I think another couple of insights that we've learned along the way is that our Prime Minister Blair talked about sustainable and durable change. As we think about systems impact, that's exactly at the heart of what we're trying to do. What we want to do is to work in partnership with people who are all working on a similar shared, big, hairy, audacious goal, if you will, to drive change, to make big bets, to ensure that we come together, because not just this panel alone, all of us need to come together to drive that change and to build it in partnership. So that's number one. Number two is that in order to create and deliver that durable change, we need to listen and work closely with communities. We don't have the answers. We need to work with them and recognize that in order to create the durable change, we have to respond to need. And so that is another key learning for us that we've taken on. And then the last is kind of related to the first, which is unless we're actually willing to bet big, unless we're willing to identify solutions in partnership with community and be bold, and that's why I think opportunities like Gaia that WEF is doing is so critically important, we won't be able to drive that systemic change. So those are some of the insights I think we've gleaned and we're trying to embed in the way that we work going forward.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think this is a good segue to invite Lei Ming to share, because Elizabeth spoke about the need for partnerships, organization alignment, and you're, to a large extent, a platform business. Forest has mobilized 650 million users. It's a mind-boggling number. You work, just on your clean energy initiative, you're working with 60 different global brands around the world. Can you tell us more about this notion of partnerships, engaging the platforms? How do you harness technology to do that and to engage your consumers, suppliers in this journey?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Ant Group has really evolved over the years, and we certainly have a very vast user base of over 1.2 billion consumers on our platform, and over 80 million merchants. Most of them are MSMEs. How to sort of engage that user base and a merchant base on this sort of sustainability journey in this sort of green transition is something we've been sort of focusing on and leveraging technology. Now, and Forest certainly is something that we have developed over the past 8 years, really have that grassroots movement of awareness and engagement to translate their carbon conscious footprint into a lifestyle. So that meaningful contributions are made. In that process, we work with all sorts of partners, and many of them in private sectors and philanthropic sectors, to sort of contribute to that process. Now, that certainly, as you mentioned, we have mobilized over 650 billion netizens, planted over 450 million trees. That's a very, very sort of a significant thinking about people's sort of daily behavior, from taking public transportation rather than drive your own car, to use sort of digital receipt rather than paper receipt. Small things like that. The level of grassroots movement participation does provide this foundation for this movement to go forward. Now, over the past years, we also have been looking at how we can empower MSMEs in this sustainability journey. Now, we sort of look at the world. Big corporations, and although they contribute, they're significant remitters of carbon emission, but you look at the supply chain, probably 80% of them contributed from supply chain, small players like MSMEs. Now, SMEs certainly contribute to 90% of the global workforce, businesses, and half of the global employment, etc. But they have always been overlooked. The public sector has been, policymakers have been very active over the past years to formulate policy framework and what public sectors should be contributing in this process, especially leveraging technology. So we try to sort of work with public sector players and private sector players to try to address this sort of a pain point for MSMEs in that journey. So a couple weeks ago, we launched this program called Program Cyrus, really call for SMEs to work together to develop standards for green disclosure, to align them, sort of make sure that they have better access to green financing opportunities. So we work with MAS, we work with IFC, try to identify that kind of exactly the opportunities for MSMEs in that journey. So, certainly call for action, that is a great thing. Sort of we try to leverage and at the time of launching 2 weeks ago in Tokyo, we had 14 e-wallet players in Asia to be part of this action, and more expressing interest to be part of this. So we're very excited, and I think this is a journey that we have to, together with all the partners, to make that needle to move.
Thank you. And for those of you who are not so familiar, many companies struggle with the Scope 3 emissions, right? You're familiar with Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. Scope 3 are essentially your supplier, your consumer base. 80% of emissions are from Scope 3. So what you can do to mobilize your suppliers, SMEs on this journey will have a very instrumental effect on global commissions. I want to turn to Selina now. In fact, one of the things that struck me listening to Mr. Blair, as well as the lady from Welcome Lib, right, is the power of technology. And you're an astute investor. You actually believe in the power of deep science and technology to drive impact. And what you're doing with Horizon Ventures is also for the profits to be plowed into the foundation to actually drive even more good in that process. Venture capital, high risk, potentially high returns if you bet right. Philanthropic impact outcomes, what we're talking about at this conference today. Are these the two ingredients that can drive speed and scale? Tell us more about your vision.
Well, thank you for your question. From our perspective, we feel that investing, look, a lot of us are interested in philanthropy. For most of us are business people. So I think Paul Krugman said that. He said productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it is everything. So investment is so important to ensure that that future capacity is possible, as what Regina was saying. Because even if there is only a modicum of hope, we should still pursue it. So from the investment side, very nicely said, we should still pursue it, even if it is modicum of hope. It will probably get me fired, because I'm sure a team of Temasek very astute investors, I mean, if they present it like this, probably tomorrow, think of another job. So for us, the most important thing, the question we ask is, first of all, is this investment relevant? Relevant to whom? To us as a group. So first of all, we want to ensure that as a group we have a different yield other than just investment returns. So every year we calculated the horrific footprint of our group. And this is our target, to see if our investment in the different projects have actually make some sense, or make some dent, or make some positive reduction in our group's footprint. If not, totally irrelevant to us. First lever. The second one is, for us, investment team, how many cycles, how many series can we support them? I mean, as you know, right, the valley of death is so vast nowadays. You probably, and then it is very in vogue to say that we want to prolong forever the exit, because I'm not ready yet. But that actually put a lot of burden on the investors. So the first thing we ask ourselves, how many rounds can we support it? We have built a cluster in one of, I think, a very critical technology to all these new environmental solutions, the synthetic biology. But you have to look at the rounds and the rounds and the rounds that we have to raise funds for to support. But it does materialize. And then that is what, as Rian said, it brings hope, and it is good. Second lever. Third lever is very Mr. Lee. So the first thing, he is Mr. Write-off himself. So for us, as a group, we will look at our investment portfolio. So if we are lucky enough to have an exit, we will systemically write off 1/3 of our investment footprint. But this is important because you have to artificially create our own reserves, or how can we enable these financial rounds that is necessary? Because romantic does it sound, environmental technology is costly, and to be a responsible investor, I think we need to be very smart about how we put money to work. I think the three combos together have steered us And so to date, we are pretty happy with our portfolio, which we have alternative foods, alternative materials, and CO2 sequestrations, huge CO2 sequestrations project, alternative energy, and so far, fingers crossed, we feel we are confidently optimistic that we will, if not have a good return, it will be a break-even portfolio for us. So we thought it is already an immense achievement given our other 2 years.
Thank you, Selina.
Hope it answered your question.
Yes, and in fact, Elizabeth mentioned that connecting climate to health, climate to education, climate to food, so on and so forth. You mentioned some of the themes and drivers like synthetic biology. Are there specific areas that is piquing your interest? I'm hoping you'll share a bit of investment tips here. That's piquing your interest in this space more than others at this point in time.
Now, yes. Women is my investment interest now. Okay, I think it is. So we're learning how to invest. So I don't want to just invest in women scientists, support women initiatives. They are our philanthropy side. So we have a program which my colleague Julia here is the master of giving. She is the maestro of giving. And it drives our whole team crazy because we have to earn enough to give. But then, so we support a lot of women scientists. We support a lot of women community builders. So this is investing in women in the philanthropy side. But what do I mean by investing? The first area that we have invested in, okay, don't laugh at me. So it doesn't seem high tech, but I think it will be an interesting one in women's sports. So we have been 2 years ago started understanding how new women models like women scientists, women sports, women heroes and different champions in different areas can actually be a sort of energizer to the whole women's economy. So we found that, unfortunately, although we have the equal audiences in women's sports, but then I don't know why, but maybe we should ask the media people here. Only 1% of the whole world's sports income goes to women. The 99% goes to other teams. So we thought it sounds like an opportunity, so we'll start doing this. And well, stay tuned, we'll let you know if it is doing. On technology side, we're investing in another sounds stupid idea, but I thought is, what is that we have abundance in? Humidity. Land in Singapore today, my hair all got crystal up. So humidity is abundant. So what is all the scientists doing in humidity? Can we turn humidity into energy? So what is we are studying how to look at the different possibilities. So this is our crazy ideas that we are pursuing.
Thank you, I like that very much. Women and humidity.
Yep, sounds like a great combo.
It's a good time for us to bring in the academic research angle because Iqbal, you've been working in the JPAL labs in MIT, and the focus of the labs is really to look at evidence, research, and how that can inform more effective policy action. And obviously this goes back down to where the intervention points, for example, investing in women, that could actually be disproportionately strong contributor to climate outcomes. Can you share with us some of these insights and how these insights are being applied? Because application is the most important. How are they being applied in the work that you are doing, as well as in conjunction with your partners in the various geographies?
Yes, of course, happy to do that. I just want to begin by thanking Seo Kui and Desmond for inviting me and for putting together such a wonderful program. Look forward to it, and thanks to all of you for choosing us, the panelists, over such wonderful coffee. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so I think the climate impact that we are talking about, the climate change we're talking about, is a huge problem. There was a hope for the longest time that, 4 or 5 years ago, that the world is gathering momentum to put finance for climate change. But if you look at the numbers for financing, Tony talked about 1.7 trillion being needed just in Asia Pacific, but he didn't talk about the deficit. As of this point, the IMF estimates that there's going to be a deficit of $800 billion a year for climate transition just in just in Asia Pacific. And so kind of all of you, the philanthropists, the private sector, the foundations have a huge role to play, because the government finances, thanks to the post-COVID stress, are not going to be able to do that. So, that's part one of it. The other problematic area that we are seeing is that the transition to climate programs has been far slower than the transition to development programs. And part of the reason for this is that the accreditation process, the review process, has been extremely slow. People just don't know what works in climate, and therefore, how do we review or accreditate it? And so kind of the speed of climate finance is actually slower than development finance, which is the second problem area. So in this mix comes J-PAL, and what we believe is that a big reason why there is hesitancy in putting money in climate, whether it's by philanthropists or foundations, is not really understanding which climate programs work, which ones don't work, and which ones work better than others. And I don't mean on individual pieces, but systematically, the way we have done this in education. What's the best way to get kids to school? What's the best way to get doctors to improve their diagnosis? We have not done that yet in climate change. What's the best way to get farmers to stop burning the forest? Is it by giving them money? Is it by imposing fines on them? Is it by giving them better machinery? Is it by educating them? We just have all these hypotheses in mind, but very little evidence. And folks, like Tony again talked in the earlier about, asking all of you as philanthropists that bring the same hard evidence that you do in your investment decisions into your philanthropy. And that's where J-PAL comes in. We started at MIT, but now we are based in more than a dozen countries, work in local universities. We actually work in 80 countries around the world. And essentially what we do is apply the same rigor that you expect from your medicines, from your vaccines, from your investments into your private sector. We apply that same lens on philanthropy, on social spending, and say, what do we know works and doesn't? So you asked me to give an example. So a few years ago, 5 years ago to be precise, I worked with the King Philanthropies in Stanford, and we started the King Climate Action Initiative at J-PAL, which basically is trying to put that same lens on climate. So one particular program that I'm very excited about is emissions trading. So in most countries in the world, advanced or developing, the way you try to reduce emissions from industries or water pollution is through a command and control structure. You designate that you cannot pollute above a level, and then you send these teams of auditors to go and find the people who are polluting more than that. So we said, is there a different way to do this? So we worked with our researchers, built partnerships. We talked about PPP. I would expand that to be PPPR. We worked with the public sector, which is the government of Gujarat in India. We worked with the philanthropy, which is the King Center and later Vedis. We worked with the private sector, which is every industry in Gujarat. And we brought in the researchers, which is ourselves. And we said, instead of this command and control structure, would you be willing to do a voluntary carbon trading, which is that if I'm polluting more, I have to buy a carbon credit. If I'm polluting less, I have a carbon credit to sell. And lo and behold, industry loves this because they don't have to deal with auditors and the inspectors and the corruption that comes with it. The government loves it because it's actually seeing results. And we found, and philanthropists love it because we were able to measure the impact, and it led to a 20 to 30% decline in pollutants in this city called Surat in Gujarat. And so now we are working to scale it up from Surat. We have taken it to Ahmedabad, which is the capital of Gujarat. 3 other states we are working with have expressed interest in scaling it up in India. And all of a sudden you have a model which is validated, which is extremely low cost, which pays for itself and which can be applied everywhere. So I really hope that we can put this evidence-informed policy making into the mix of the partnerships, and I think that can have a huge result on the climate space.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Because I'm also a big believer of emissions trading, because for one, it actually raises awareness of one's carbon footprint with a view to reducing it, but at the same time, it also helps us better understand the value of ecosystem services and better price that into business decisions. We have about 3 minutes and a little bit more. We would love to invite you next year to the Philanthropy Asia Summit 2025. So let's fast forward and assume you're on stage again, and I'm asking you, moderating the panel, and I'll ask you, what have you achieved in 2024 that you'd like to share with the audience? Starting with Lei Ming, and then we'll wrap up with the ladies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned the program CIRUS, which is a program we worked together with IFC and MAS on green disclosure for MSMEs. Next year, this time, we hope we can see tangible results, albeit small, hopefully bigger, for MSEs. Really engage all the participants to contribute in the process and hopefully make that a global impact program.
Iqbal?
Great, tough question. So I think the first thing is exactly the theme of this thing. I really want to see more partnerships develop, because none of what we do from evidence to scale is possible without partnerships. So I think partnerships is important. The second thing I think I would love to see next year is to be able to be on this stage and say that there were actually practical and responsible use of how AI helped us in the development of the climate space. Earlier, Lizzie and I were talking about this. The world is full of bad technology application examples, from one laptop per child to cook stoves that don't work, to winterization and heating. And oftentimes the buzz gets ahead of us. I think with AI, we actually have the potential is actually far more realistic. The potential is very high. And so if we can do for instance, on climate, the ability to monitor, for instance, fires in Indonesia and deforestation in the Amazon with satellite images, and then use machine learning algorithms to kind of understand where it is happening and then, get the resources where it is happening is huge. But it needs good training data sets, and it needs responsible application of AI. So I hope next year when we are here, we can actually share some examples and say it was not all hype, but they were actually practical examples that worked.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, and we wrap up with Sulina.
Sure. I hope to see 2 things. I know you said one, Gimhui, but I think one of them that we haven't really touched on today, but I think is a true opportunity here in the region, is more blended finance vehicles. I think certainly we do make a lot of grants. That's the foundation's core. However, I do think there's a lot of opportunity to use our capital and use others' capital even more catalytically to drive greater private sector investment, hopefully into women and women's sports, but more broadly. So I'd say that's one. And then the second thing I hope we do, which I guess is the challenge of going third after you and not talking about AI, but I think to talk about risks and failure. Because our job in philanthropy is to do the hard things where nobody else will go. And if we aren't failing every so often, or maybe more often than not, we aren't pushing ourselves hard enough to solve this challenge. So I hope we have a chance to talk about that too.
And
well, for us, fingers crossed, hopefully in 2025, 2 companies from probably enjoy 2 exits from our synthetic biology cluster. In 2025, I am hopeful that a few companies who is working on alternative plastic will have enjoy wide adoption in the market use.
Thank you. And please join me in thanking the panelists for sharing your views and insights.